Let's get Mikey. Yeah, he hates everything.
Hi, I'm Mike Munger, and I'm going to talk about when is the market price fair. There's a famous little writing by John Locke called Venditio. He wrote it in about 1670, and this is a copy that I got from the Bodleian Library at Oxford. This is John Locke's actual handwriting, and you can see the scratch throughs. It's interesting to think that someone labored over this. Now, the question that Locke is asking in Venditio is, when is the market price fair? Remember, this is 1670. This is 100 years before Adam Smith published The Wealth of Nations. So it's a very modern view, and to foreshadow, Locke's answer was that the market price is fair when there are many buyers and many sellers, which is competition, and when the buyer or seller does not use their knowledge of the desperation of the other bargainer. Now, that means that there may, under some circumstances, be a moral requirement not to charge the most or take the lowest price that you can get. Let me explain why. So the question is, what is the just price? And his answer is the market price is always just. But then when would a moral person be justified in making his own market price? What is prohibited, allowed, or permitted? So for Locke, there must be many buyers and many sellers, and no one can much influence the price. If the buyer or seller has enough market power to set the price, he must act as if he cannot. But this artificial or fictitious bargain can take account of other factors, especially opportunity cost. So it's a brilliant argument. It's very modern, and it's very economicus. It is something that an economist might talk about today. So he gives 4 examples. And the first 3 I can go through quite quickly. The first is, suppose that in the first year I'm a farmer, I can sell wheat at 25 shillings per bushel. The second year, the price of wheat is 40 shillings per bushel. It's gone up. There's not enough wheat. Am I justified in charging the higher price? Because after all, I'm taking advantage of the fact that there's a shortage. And Locke says, of course, it's a market price that reflects the value of this resource. You're not the one deciding on 40 cents, on 40 shillings. It is the market that has decided that. For you to say I can only charge 25 would remove all of your incentives to find ways to grow more of the wheat that people so desperately want. So it is fine to charge different prices at different times if a competitive market is deciding what those prices are. Second, suppose that I have a horse that I really love this horse. It's a great horse. My neighbor looks and sees the horse and says, that's a great horse. I want to buy that horse. How much will you sell it for? And I say, I like this horse. It's not for sale. And the neighbor says, no, come on. Name your price. It's not for sale. Come on. Okay, fine. 30 pounds. Now, 30 pounds is an outrageous price. And the neighbor says, well, that's crazy. I'm not going to buy a horse for 30 pounds. Look, I said it wasn't for sale. You told me to name a price. So my neighbor thinks I'm crazy. We part. Well, I'm walking my horse along, shaking my head about my neighbor, and I see a traveling salesman, and he has a cart. And the cart is laden with valuable cargo. And the cargo, the stuff that he wants to sell, the merchandise, is worth at least 1,000 pounds. And it's tipping into a muddy part of the river. It's tipping into a bog. And if it does, all of the merchandise will be ruined and it'll have no value. And the seller, the merchant, sees me and says, oh, please help. Thank goodness that you're here. Can I buy your horse? Now, I think about it. He's going to lose 1,000 pounds worth of cargo if I do not sell him or rent him my horse. What price am I allowed to charge? And Locke says, we have already decided that you would be willing, not just a minimum price, you would be happy to sell your horse for 30 pounds. So that was before, when the person you were talking to, didn't desperately need the horse. Now that this merchant desperately needs it, you cannot use that information against him. You cannot charge more than 30 pounds for the horse because you were satisfied before to accept that price. It would be morally wrong for you to use your knowledge of that person's desperation against him. So you must act as if you had been answering the same question. How much would you sell your horse for? 30 pounds. Here you go, I'll give you 30 pounds. And that means that he saves the 970 pounds. Third, a merchant in Danzig has 2 ships, and they're both full of grain. Now he can send the grain to Ostend, where things are normal and the price is 25 shillings a bushel, or he can send the ships to Dunkirk. And at Dunkirk, they have a famine, and the price is 100 shillings per bushel. Well, the 2 questions are, where should I send my ships, and at what price can I charge? Well, it would be crazy for me to say, you know, Dunkirk really needs this wheat. I don't want to exploit that need, and so I'm going to send it to Ostend because they don't need it as much. I've actually heard something like this argument before, but obviously you should send your wheat to where it is needed most. The interesting question is, what price can you charge? Because the reason that you sent your ship to the place that really needs it is that the price is higher there. Yes, it's a signal that that's where you should send it, but should you take advantage of that? After all, you know that the people of Dunkirk desperately need this wheat. Shouldn't you just charge 25 shillings rather than 100? Well, Locke makes a very interesting and modern consideration come to the fore here, and that is secondary markets. Suppose that I show up at Dunkirk with my ships and I say, I want to be moral. I am only going to charge 25 shillings per bushel. Well, the first person standing on the pier says, I will buy all of both ships and I'll pay you in an hour. So the guy buys both ships worth of wheat, turns around and sells them both at 100 shillings per bushel, and then pays you the difference. So you're not helping the people of Dunkirk at all because there's going to be a secondary market. And the reason is there is a market price in Dunkirk. It's not that there's no wheat. You're not the only one that has wheat. If you're the only one that had wheat, then it might be more complicated. But since you go there because the market price is 100 shillings per bushel, you can sell it at 100 shillings per bushel. There are transactions taking place at that price. So the market price is just if there are many buyers and many sellers, even if it is true that in one place or at one time, the price is much higher than in another place or time. The fourth example is the most challenging in a way, and it's the most complicated. So I'm going to quote directly from Venditio. A ship at sea that has an anchor to spare meets another which has lost all her anchors. So these are sailing ships. If you don't have an anchor, you'll drift up on the shore and the ship will break. You'll lose all the cargo and all of the sailors and passengers will be killed. So not having an anchor is a pretty big deal. What here shall be the just price that she shall sell her anchor to the distressed ship? To this I answer, the same price that she would sell the same anchor to a ship that was not in that distress. For that still is the market price for which one would part with anything to anybody who was not in distress and absolute want of it. So let me interpret that. What Locke means there is that I think, would I sell this anchor if this other person already had 2 anchors? What price would I charge? What price am I willing to get for this anchor? And it might be quite a bit. The reason I have 3 anchors is that you need extras. I might decide not to sell the anchor at all, and then Locke realizes that. So the master of the vessel must make his estimate by the length of the voyage, the season and seas he sails in, and to what risk he shall run himself by parting with that extra anchor, which all put together he would not part with at any rate. He might not sell it, that's fine. But if he would, he must then take no more for it from a ship in distress than he would from any other. That is, my knowledge of the fact that you have no anchors can't condition the price that I'm willing to sell it for. Now that might not seem right to you because that's not really the subjective value. The subjective value to the ship in distress is really, really high. But Locke is trying to combine this justice of the market price with a moral theory about the circumstances under which I am justified in charging a high price. And his argument, which might be right or wrong, but it's very interesting from a moral perspective, is that I am not justified in charging different people different prices based on the desperation of their need. All I can take into account is my own valuation. So Locke's theory of just price combines modern elements of economics, saying that the market price is just when there's many buyers and many sellers, with a moral theory that amounts to claims on charity, where I may have a duty not to charge more than the amount that I would reasonably be willing to receive because I know that the other person is desperate.
Yeah, he hates everything.